Caruso. Jess, by the way, that was fantastic.
Yeah,
It was really good. So excited. My husband is also here. He's Tom Caruso. He's wearing a kind of matching shirt. These are shirts that I designed. He's got the Aberlogi shirt on in the Kelp Forest. I'm wearing the Garibaldi shirt in the Kelp Forest. He's doing the I did bring my shirts if anybody's interested. I have women's dresses too. They're actually super comfy. I'm a marine biologist and I'm the founder of Get Inspired. And Get Inspired is a nonprofit organization. I actually work in Garden Grove. I live there. And my office is Orange County. So my mom came out to visit me from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I took her to Crystal Cove and I said, this is my office. This is where I work. So I get to work underwater. Pretty cool. I've worked with several of you in this room. Darren is one of my favorite teachers to work with. She's a local middle school teacher in what's Ocean View?
Ocean View, Vista School.
Yeah. So she's a super ocean focused and teaches her students all about ocean and recycling, especially recycling and sustainability. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about what Get Inspired does, talk to you about some of the opportunities to be involved. And our projects mostly focus on restoration, ocean restoration, which not a lot of people do, especially in California. And it's because it's really hard. It's really hard to get permits to do it. And most people poop out after trying for a year or two to get a permit. It's easier to go pay your $50 and get a fishing license to take anything out of the ocean than it is to put anything back in the ocean. That's a difficult concept to understand, but it's absolutely true. The last time I did an abalone restoration outplanting, took me 2 years of fighting with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, over 600 people writing letters, calling governors, calling Congress people to try to get those abalone, which belong in the ocean, put back in the ocean. So hopefully, at some point, this paradigm will shift, and it won't be so easy to take things out of the ocean. It'll be easy to put things back in the ocean, because right now, that's not how the tables are turned. So I'll share with you some of my hurdles, my battles. That's why I'm the only one who does it, because it is extraordinarily difficult. And nobody pays you to sit around and fight and bang on doors of congressmen to try to get them to let you restore something. People pay you to restore things. So it's very hard to get funding to wait out these processes. So the mission of Get Inspired is to inspire stewardship and curiosity for the natural world through the exploration of science. And essentially, I started the organization because I kept getting laid off from other nonprofit organizations. Because nonprofits work on funding, and funding always runs out. So I initially started with the Kelp Project. I got laid off and moved on to another organization, keeping the Kelp Project going. Got laid off again, moved the Kelp Project to another organization, kept it going. Got laid off again, decided, okay, I'll just start my own organization. If I need to lay myself off, I can do that. And since then, I've had about 35 other jobs to make a living while I'm doing all this work. I have worked in 40 different schools in Orange County, another 12 in LA County, and over 15,000 students. I'm the only employee of Get Inspired, but I have a ton, literally an army of volunteers that help, just like Jess, to help put all this information together and synthesize information for it. And Tom, to help us get all this work done. So I'm going to talk about our 3 main projects: Aquaponics, Science Expedition, and the Ocean Restoration Project, Orange County. So aquaponics, this is something that Dareth was doing in her classroom. I actually have pictures of your classroom in this presentation. Aquaponics is something that goes back to my college days. I actually majored in marine biology and aquaculture, 2 bachelor's degrees at the same time. And I did that because my whole childhood, I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. Didn't see the ocean until I was 12, but I knew I was going to be a marine biologist when I was 10. And my whole childhood, my dad always, you're never going to get a job. And he was right. It's very difficult to get a job as a marine biologist, so don't be fooled. This is not the normal path to end up standing up here. But I decided, oh, if I got 2 majors, I might have a better opportunity to get a job. So aquaculture actually was a really natural thing for me. I had been growing fish in my bedroom with the squirrels and the lizards and the parakeets and everything else that my sister and I kept for my whole childhood. So growing fish, growing shrimps and other invertebrates was real natural. So it was a perfect match for my marine biology degree. And aquaponics is just that. I'm also a gardener. I'm a naturalist as well, but a gardener, so growing crops and fish in the same water, using the nutrients from the fish to grow plants, is a beautiful cycle. It's an ecosystem. So I've been able to teach students how to do that, which Orange County, of course, used to be a big farming area. We don't farm anymore, and there's not any land to do so, but you can do this on your dining room table. You can farm in really small spaces and still produce your own food here locally. And so there are companies in Orange County who do this and still produce food for us here locally. Actually, on November the 19th, if you're interested, we're having a Sustain Giving in Long Beach. I'll be sending out posters and invitations here quickly, serving up produce from a local farm in Long Beach, but also we're going to be serving abalone from our abalone farm in Goleta. We're going to be serving fresh mussels from a farm in Long Beach, and we're going to be serving fresh oysters from a farm down in Carlsbad. So everything will be coming here from the local area the week before Thanksgiving to give thanks for all the food that we produce locally. So aquaponics uses 90% less water than traditional agriculture because you're not just spraying it all over the ground. The fish and the plants are all growing in water, so evaporation is a lot less. And it's also, you can grow food where we live, so the sustainability factor is very high. It allows me to teach fish biology, of course, nutrient cycling, plant biology, systems, chemistry, and engineering, all in one little package. It's a beautiful thing. And Dara had her students all over this. They were taking care of the plants and eating them, which I remember one of the students saying, "Can we eat this? It didn't come out of a plastic bag. Is it okay? Is it healthy?" Yeah, you know, you've seen it grow every day from a tiny little seed. So it allows us to grow food where we live. And if anybody's interested in doing this, please talk to me because it's so easy and I can get you started on your kitchen table with 2 gallons of water and a little beta fish. Science Expeditions, the second program that Get Inspired works on, and this includes, it started off actually with environmental science. Anybody here from Huntington Beach High School? Okay. It started actually with environmental science classes, AP environmental science classes at Huntington Beach High School, and it expanded out to high schools all over Orange County. But AP environmental science teachers were asking me, hey, you know, can we do something out in the field to help us to satisfy the requirements for teaching field science? And so I, of course, am a diver, so I teamed up with a local dive shop called Ocean Gear in Huntington Beach, and we were teaching students how to become divers and research divers at the same time. So we'd go out, do all their training, we'd go to Catalina for 3 days, and the students would produce research papers based on original research that they did on their very first ocean dives. And it's been going on now for 17 years. But other teachers weren't divers and they wanted to do other things. So I started taking them to Yosemite for 5 days. We'd go to Joshua Tree for a weekend and camp and hike and climb. We'd go to the national park out in Channel Islands. And I also got a lot of adults going, hey, I want to do that too. So I started taking adults on these trips as well, down to Baja to go hug the whales, which if you haven't done before, is magnificent. It's the only place in the world where whales willingly want to love you and come up and let you hug them and kiss them. I know Dara's done it 10 to 15 times in her yes. But it's awesome. If you haven't been down there, let me know. I'm going down again this year. Ecology of Alaska. I've been a naturalist as well in Alaska for 11 years now. Dara is also up there in Alaska as a naturalist, helping out with some of those programs. And so taking adults on some of these trips, because we want to learn too, right? So they were jealous. How come the kids get all the fun? And the adults were able to take some of those trips. But there's some students, this is out off of 73 doing some soil analysis at Casper Park. And here's the scuba program, the research diving program as well. Now we get into the ocean restoration projects. So the kelp forests, of course, are the center of that because without kelp we have nothing else on our coast, right? Now from the wedge, basically the west jetty of Newport Harbor, all the way to Long Beach, we don't have kelp forests. As you know, if you've been across the street to the beach, there's sand on the beach. So sand indicates that it's a sandy bottom out in the ocean. There's no kelp out there. When you get to Newport Beach at Little Corona, it becomes rocky, right? That's the first place you can go tide pooling. So when there's rocks on the beach, that means there's rocks out in the ocean. And that's where our reefs begin, and kelp forests grow on reefs. So our kelp forests start at Little Corona, and they go essentially all the way down to San Diego. And then when you go north, those kelp forests start growing again right at San Pedro, and again they go all the way up to Oxnard, where there's a few sandy beaches up there. So in the 1970s, kelp forests started declining. And it was for many different reasons, which I'll go over. But by the year 2000, kelp forests in Orange County had diminished by 90%. We had lost all of our kelp forests. And of course, there are 800 species that rely on them. And we're one of them. So people were talking about, oh yeah, I remember when we used to catch such and such. And they weren't catching it anymore. But nobody was talking about why. Because the kelp forests are largely invisible. How many people in here are scuba divers? Yeah. You've never been in a kelp forest before. How many of you snorkeled in a kelp forest? For heaven's sakes. All right, so when you leave here today, by the way, that was 3 hands, people are saving right now their little piggy banks all over the world, nickels at a time, to come here, right here in Orange County, and go scuba diving. They're saving their entire life savings to come here, where we live, to go in that water. Right now, especially during the fall, it's the most beautiful. The water's clear. They want to go to our marine protected areas in Laguna Beach at Shaw's Cove, and they want to go diving. We have it for free every single day, 365 days a year. So for heaven's sakes, go to Walgreens or CVS, take advantage of the end of the summer sales, and get yourself a mask and snorkel, because it's free and it's open every day, and the water's warm right now. So go out and check it out. There are 800 species out there, and they all have jobs to do. Right, Jamie? The senorita wrasse is out there cleaning the fish. Right? And just don't flail around, just sit still and watch things. And you'll see everybody doing their jobs in the kelp forest. Okay, promise. All right, good. All right, so we started off with kelp forest, restoring the kelp. Then we started moving, after we got the kelp forest back, and I'll tell you how we did that, started working on white sea bass, another fish that disappeared during the 70s, 60s, and 70s due to gill netting. Thank goodness we can't do that anymore, but gill nets catch everything that swims through them. And so students are releasing those back in the ocean. Green abalone, which if you don't know what an abalone is, most people, at least under 40 years old, do not. This is an abalone. Most people have seen that part before. But this is the boring side. That's what they look like. They look like rocks underwater. But we ate all these too. And I just started working on pismo clams. Tom, hold up the pismo clam. Pismo clams used to be very plentiful, where on a day like a negative tide next week, there'd be thousands of people out on this beach in Huntington, digging them up and making chowder. They're gone. We ate them. So this year, I've been working on this project for 3 years. We are the first people in the world to have ever successfully grown, hatched, spawned pismo clams. And right now, they're 2 millimeters. They're so cute. I carried their pictures around like my baby pictures, so if you want to see them afterwards, I'll show you. I haven't shown anybody yet because it's kind of secret. So I only talk about it, and web can't repeat it. So I only talk about it, but they're so cute. They're just so tiny. We watch them grow from like 16 microns to size now where I can see them with my eyeballs. So amazing. Okay, so the goals of these projects are to educate students about aquaculture, because all these programs are done in schools, and kelp forest ecology, involve the community, because all these projects are done with volunteers, and to create ocean stewards, of course. If you helped grow kelp and replant it in the ocean, you can bet that those students are stakeholders in the health of the kelp forest. And I figured that out when students would come back after they graduated from college and say, how's our kelp doing? That's exactly right. That's our kelp. And then lastly, of course, restore that species along our coast. So the kelp restoration project actually started in 2002. We didn't have any kelp left in Orange County. The only kelp forest we had was along the inside west jetty of the inside of Newport Harbor. And that's a long story, which is gonna spin off into a USC study that we're working on right now, because it's a super kelp. And Salt Creek, down in Dana Point. I have no idea why, but luckily we had those 2 sources, because you can't make babies from no parents, right? I had to go collect adult kelp in order to make new babies. So the 800 different species that relied on them I used to go out and do fish counts before the restoration started, and there weren't any. You'd have to look under the rocks and in the holes, and every once in a while you'd see a fish tail swim away from you in a hole, and it looked like it could have been a big sheephead, but now you can't see it anymore. There weren't any fish to count. Once we finished the restoration of the kelp, doing fish counts like this, because there's 3 dimensions of kelp in sky-high towers swimming around. So the kelp forest is extraordinarily important. And the whole reason for the collapse of all this, as Jess touched on, was the removal of the sea otter. 1884, the last sea otter was taken in Orange County in Dana Point Harbor. It's registered in one of the books. It wasn't on harbor then, it was just Dana Point. But they pulled up on the docks, they were selling the furs, and it's recorded in one of the commerce books. The last sea otter gone. And to build on what you said, Jess, sea otters have not been allowed in Southern California for 25 years. That legislation has now worn off, but the Department of Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Fish and Wildlife made a deal with fishermen because fishermen hate sea otters. They actually compete with us, right? We want to fish everything, and sea otters eat 60% of their body weight a day. There's a little bit of competition there. And if you go to Northern California and mention the word sea otters, you can get shot. Because they do not like sea otters up there anymore. They like them in the Central Coast, don't move them anywhere else. So the Department of Fish and Wildlife made a deal with fishermen and said, you're not going to allow sea otters in Southern California, right? And they said, yes, we're going to put them out at the Channel Islands. They actually reorganized the sea otter population because the only ones we had left were in a very small community in Central California. And they thought, well, what if something would happen to that small community? We'd lose all the sea otters on the planet. So they spread them out on the Channel Islands and around the Central Coast. So now they're in different places in the Central Coast, and they actually swam back mostly from the outer Channel Islands. There's still a few out of St. Nicholas Island. But they said if any sea otter came around Point Conception, that the Department of Fish and Wildlife had to pick it up in a net and take it back north. They literally were not allowed down here for the last 25 years. The other reason being that we actually bomb San Clemente Island on a very regular basis. The U.S. Navy detonates bombs out there, and sea otters used to live in San Clemente Island. So if sea otters lived there, the U.S. Navy couldn't detonate bombs on San Clemente Island. So the Navy is very dead set against having sea otters on San Clemente Island. Now that legislation ran out in 2018, so sea otters are allowed down here again, and they have been seen just sporadically. People every once in a while post a picture. There was one at Crystal Cove in 2013, and somebody had a picture of it snacking on a lobster. There was one in Laguna Beach in 2013. I know this because that was the year I had outplanted abalone, and I thought, no, not now. But they left. They just came down and scouted, and often the males will do that. They scout out new areas, but they went back up north. And they probably didn't have enough food down here. And it was kind of sparse. The kelp forest was just starting to come back. So who knows? They may end up down here, and then we're going to have some serious battles to fight because fishermen really don't like it. But this is what the reefs looked like in Orange County, minus the kelp. It's still trying to hang on there in 2002 when I started the project. So there was just blankets, as you can see. There's no room for anything to grow. Like nothing can come up underneath of the sea urchin. So blankets of spiny urchins, purples and reds. And this is what's playing out right now in Central and Northern California. Monterey Bay, the iconic kelp forest of California, disappeared. And guess what they have in plentitude? Otters. So it wasn't the otters that did this. It takes a lot to collapse an ecosystem. Not just one thing, a lot of stresses. Remember that sea otter was killed in 1884. Kelp forest didn't die in 1884. It took 100 years for that kelp forest to die off. So, first thing we started to do in the 1950s and 60s was cover Orange County with homes, right? The aerospace race started. We built tons of homes in Orange County. Most of our homes were all built in 1960, right? So covering up all the land, we know what happens when you cover it with concrete. Every time it rains, you get runoff, right? So every time it rains, we can't see the bottom. And don't go in the ocean, right, for 5 days after it rains. So I talked to a diver who just passed away. Unfortunately, she was 96 years old. And she used to dive on the coast when she was a little girl because it was during the Depression. And she would tell me stories of how she could see the bottom from her dad's little rowboat. and she could pluck abalone with a long stick off the bottom of the ocean, 30 feet of water, all along our coast, including Long Beach. Can't do that here anymore. You can go to Catalina and see the bottom from the top of a boat. Not here. And we know from historical records that kelp used to grow out to 115-foot depth of water. We know because we harvested kelp for World War I to make potash for ammunition. So it was very well mapped because we knew that resource very well. Kelp doesn't grow to 115 feet anymore. Why? Because the sunlight doesn't get down that deep due to turbidity. Turbidity is the cloudiness of the water. The last straw, after the urchins, after the otters, after, by the way, other things do eat sea urchins like sheephead and lobsters. But guess what? We were fishing very heavily in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Sheephead and lobsters. So 1983, before most of you were born, was the largest, heaviest, most damaging El Nino in recorded history. These are all waves that were coming over the Huntington Beach Pier, took out the Seal Beach Pier, took out Aliso Creek, actually had a pier, destroyed it. And after that, the rest of the kelp washed up on the beach. And we didn't have any after the 1983 El Nino. It never came back. Now normally that happens. The El Ninos are like a restart button. Think about this for a second. Every single ecosystem has a restart button. Some of them happen more frequently than others, but our forests have forest fires. It's a restart button. Everything gets a new chance to regenerate, primary, secondary growth, and regrow. Our El Ninos, which happen every 10 to 15 years, are our reset buttons for the kelp forest. Because a prime, very mature kelp forest just has kelp growing in it. All that beautiful understory of algae gets outcompeted by kelp. Well, that's unfair. We have 80 different species of algae. So reset, El Nino, everything gets to start over again, take its rightful place on the reefs. And then kelp eventually makes its way up to the top again and shades everything out until there's another reset. But because of all those other stresses, all those straws on the camel's back, that didn't happen after the El Nino. So, started the restoration project, trained 287 volunteer scuba divers who cared about their ecosystem. These were just teachers and bankers, a couple of professors, engineers, had some plywood salesmen, car salesmen, but they would just come out on their days off. I had a guy who would wear his dry suit and his work uniform underneath it. And when he'd get out of the water, he'd take the dry suit off, he was dry. He'd say, I'm going to work now. So everybody who came out just cared. And they're not scientists. I mean, if there was a bunch of scientists out there doing this, nobody would know what happened. It was our community, the people who live with us, who cared enough to go out and work on restoring kelp. 3 days a week we were out there, in the freezing cold sometimes. And 5,000 kids in Orange County, in schools all over, grew kelp in their classrooms. Now this is a very complicated technique, as you can see. There's a Rubbermaid containers and a Rubbermaid cart. You just can't buy these things anywhere. There's a shop plate, all stuff actually you can buy from Home Depot. I'm kidding. Everything's from Home Depot except for that. That's a chiller, and that keeps the water cold because our water's pretty cold out there. And we grow them in classrooms. This is over at Bell Intermediate School in Garden Grove. And we grow them on little pieces of bathroom tile. Again, very complicated. A bathroom tile, little strips that I cut, and the kelp would only get to about 1/8 of an inch in the classroom, but it grew 400 times larger than, of course, when a spore is produced from the kelp. We put it out in the ocean, it would grow 12 inches in the first week because every element on the periodic table is in the ocean. So it got everything it needed. It would grow over that tile and the rubber band and connect to the reef. Now, it took me 7 permits to do this, 3 years of fighting to get the permits, and I had to lease the land, the reefs, from the state of California to plant the kelp on. Yeah. So, restored. After being gone for 25 years, we went from urchin barrens to beautiful kelp forests. Now, this is a funny story. I'm just going to tell it real fast, but 2009, Labor Day weekend, big south swells, lots of kelp had washed up onto the beach. We were so happy we had kelp again that hit the surface. We were having parties, high-fiving each other. And I got a call on the Tuesday after Labor Day weekend from the city of Laguna Beach. And they said, Nancy, we need you to come to our next meeting. I said, why? They said, well, there was a big storm, kelp washed up on the beach, and we had the worst Labor Day weekend in the history of our businesses in Laguna Beach, and they all want to attack you for it because it's the kelp's fault. I said, oh crap, what am I going to do? So I went to the archives of Laguna, pulled out all the pictures from 1902, like, look, there's supposed to be kelp here. And went to the meeting. I found a company who would pick up the kelp and use it for biofuel at LAX airport, you know, like just collect it, give it to them, they'll make biofuel out of it. That didn't happen. That was too much work. But the next year, of course, we realized that we were in a recession. It was the recession that kept people from going to the beach, not the kelp. But they wanted to blame the kelp for us. So out of that, I realized, oh, we forgot to educate the people who own the multi-million-dollar homes in Laguna Beach. We should probably educate them too. So we started Kelp Fest. And I know Dara's been to many Kelp Fests, Tom's been to many Kelp Fests. And Kelp Fest was created to foster an appreciation for the kelp forest that most people who lived in Laguna didn't even remember that existed at one time. And had been gone for 25 years. So, beautiful art, lots of dancing, singing, eating, just to remind people that kelp forests were important. Next came the white sea bass. This is a program that was started by Hub's SeaWorld Research Institute. They have little cages right on Warner and PCH. They have one in Dana Point. They have one up in Marina Del Rey, where they grow white sea bass and release them into the ocean. They've been doing it for 26 years. They've released over 2.6 million white sea bass. And I said, I'd love to put this in the classroom, teach kids about aquaculture. So we did that. This is at Huntington Beach High School. This was the first school I built this 13 years ago for them, and they've been producing white sea bass ever since. How cute. Look at those little baby faces. So we've actually put in the ocean almost 2,000 fish. The kids, more importantly, take care of them every day, take care of the engineering of the systems, maintenance of the systems, feed the fish, and then we get to go out and release them at the end of the semesters. So we do it in December and June if anybody wants to go. We've also done it underwater with some of the students that we train to go scuba diving. And there's Orange Coast College is also part of the program, so we release theirs down at Newport. And we started working on green abalone. And the abalone are actually quite boring looking on the outside. They look like rocks, and when you go in the water with your snorkels and your masks, you're not going to even notice them because they look like rocks. But the inside, of course, is what we're most familiar with. We make jewelry, we make buttons out of them, and normally we use the abalone from Australia, which is the most beautiful abalone in the world. The green abalone of Orange County is the second most beautiful abalone in the world. But the one from New Zealand is the one, they are all farm raised. One from New Zealand is the one that's usually used for barrettes and for buttons and things. But in Orange County, in California, we have 7 different species of abalone. 2 of them are endangered species, the rest are threatened species. And most of you don't remember living in a time with abalone, but we exploited this resource as well. So I want to show you just a couple pictures of how many we used to have. This is a processing plant in Morro Bay, and they're laying on a pile of shells, as you can see, that's about 25 feet tall. This is how many we used to have. This is a processing plant in Santa Barbara with several guys sitting and standing next to this giant pot. This is a tide pool in Laguna Beach, where every single one of these little white spots is a black abalone. They're an endangered species now. I've only seen 2 my whole life. I look for them. Look how plentiful they used to be just in the tide pools. This is a restaurant in Hollywood covered in 50,000 abalone shells, because that's how many there used to be. So if you went out to go fishing, free diving or spear fishing in the ocean, you could always count on finding an abalone, because they don't move. They're snails, right? They can't run away from you. They're not like a fish. If you didn't catch a fish, you could just come in and grab an abalone, or 10. It's now illegal to take abalone anywhere in California. Commercially, you can't take them at all in Orange County, or the state of California, or Washington, or Oregon, or Alaska. They do occur in all over the world. There's 57 species, and everywhere they occur, they are endangered and threatened. So we're working on restoring that species through a very collaborative effort, again, with students and volunteers. I've been working on this project for 11 years. 1, because it takes a long time to grow abalone. They grow about this much a year, and I need them to be that big before I plant them in the ocean, because everything in the ocean eats abalone that big. So I've been raising them, spawning them, growing them in classrooms. I also have 10,000 of them up on a farm up up in Santa Barbara where they are raising abalone for food. So they're raising red abalone for markets and they're raising my green abalone for restoration. I've taught over 3,000 kids to grow abalone in their classrooms. There's some of the schools. I think there's about 16 different schools that raise abalone. There's the babies right there, tiny little speck. And we have about 6,000 right now. They're about as big as a credit card. I need to get them about an inch and a half longer before I put them out in the ocean so that they don't all get eaten. Next species is the pismo clam. Now, of course, there's not a whole lot of data that goes with Orange County's pismo clam populations. But every time I talk to the old timers about abalone, they would always bring up clams as well. And about 3 years ago, I thought, I've never seen one of these pismo clams. Let's go out and dig for them. So we started digging around all through the sandy beaches of Newport and Huntington Beach and realized there aren't any. Well, that's important for somebody who does restoration, but no one knows how to grow them, I thought. How are we gonna do this? So we got to work with a team of aquaculturists in Long Beach, and we started working on that. We've been working on that for 3 years. And last year, if you're interested in helping with this, I do it all through the low tide season. We actually raked the entire distance of Bolsa Chica State Beach, 4.2 miles with rakes. About 20 of us, side by side. We did it over 6 months. And we found 228 clams. Now I have pictures of the 70s, and if you have any, please share with me, of on a low tide day, there'd be 228 people with buckets of clams that they all took home to make chowder. So we've lost a lot of clams, I found out. I'm gonna start clamming now at Newport Pier starting next Tuesday, and we're going to go from the pier all the way to the river, hopefully this year. If anybody wants to help, that's a lot of raking. So let me know. But I'm trying to figure out how many are left, where do they live, can I tag them and find them again, how do they reproduce, when do they reproduce, and if you have stories or photos of where you used to clam, or your grandparents have stories, I'm really interested in that because I don't even know where they used to live. How plentiful they were. So, you're probably thinking, Nancy, how can I help? This sounds so amazing. Well, I'm glad you asked. We are looking for people who have wetsuits, people who go free diving, because we're going to be free diving for clams as well. We free dive off the tide pools, and actually in the tide pools, we did for a while, because I have permits to look for baby abalone. I need clam rakers. So this is what it looks like to go out and help with the clams. We go out and rake the beach, just like that, side by side. And we look for clams. They're beautiful, right? These little baby clams. It's like Christmas, because we never know if we're gonna find them. If you find one, like, I got a clam! You jump up and down. I need scuba divers. So if you are a diver, we go in the water every week. Right now I'm surveying for sargassum, and I'm also surveying for baby abalone, and mapping out the abalone populations for my proposal next January. You can also help me with politics and permits. So letter writing campaigns, if you know a representative or a congressman or an assembly person, believe it or not, I actually had to write a bill. I never thought as a marine biologist I'd be a legislator, but I had to write a bill a couple years ago because they forgot to put the word restoration as a permitted activity for the marine protected areas. So I found out in order to put one word into that, I had to write a bill and get people to sign it and get an assembly person to carry it. It took me 1.5 years to get the governor to sign it. But if anything would have happened in our marine protected areas before then, we could not have done restoration. And guess what happened 2 weeks after the governor signed that bill in October of 2021? An oil spill. Restoration would have been illegal had I not passed that bill. So there's good serendipity for you. Yay!
By the way, if I may, did you guys all hear that? It would have been illegal to fix the problem.
It happened in the Refugio oil spill in Santa Barbara. They couldn't do restoration on the beaches because restoration was illegal then. Nobody lives in Refugio Beach, so nobody made us think about it. Could you imagine here if we weren't allowed to do restoration? That would have been a problem. If you're an attorney, I need your help. If you do PR, I need your help. This is going to take everything I've got to get my permit to put abalone in the water, especially here in these marine protected areas. So it's going to take our whole community to get this done. because they've already told me it's gonna take me 2 years to fight them. They said flat out, the boxing ring's open for 2 years. You can also buy my merch. So Tom's got the shirt on. I have little female dresses with the pockets, and this is just adorable. How do you like my abs? You can have 6-pack abs. You can also donate, of course. Just as Stacy said, nonprofits work on donations. And you would think, oh, the government is giving money to Nancy to restore all these species. No, I don't get any money from the government. All they give me is heartache. So support your local nonprofits who are doing the work like this, because that's how we get it done. It's the only way that I can afford to go out and do this work. So I'm also trying to build 3 new aquaponic systems, a new white sea bass system, and 2 new abalone systems, which will be helped by all funding as well. So thank you so much. This is my contact information, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
She's got cards over here that you can either take pictures of or just take.
Yes. And I have free abalone shells.